So can you explain to us the significance of this beautiful building that we're sitting here in front of?
This is the State Opera. It was originally built in 1882, and it was built as the German theatre, or the German language theatre of Prague. This was the time of the Czech national revival. By the time it was built, Prague was an overwhelmingly Czech-speaking city, and it was very confidently Czech, as we can see in this other building here, yes, which is the National Museum.
And so you mentioned was built in 1880, right?
It's built in the 1880s as well, okay, so they're built at roughly the same time. And as you can see, it's a much bigger building, a much more confident building. Yes. This, at the time, towards the end of the 19th century, in terms of population, there would have been around about 40,000 German speakers in Prague. The total population of the city was nearly 1 million.
Oh, okay, so
there was an overwhelmingly Czech-speaking city, but with this very rich seam of German-speaking, German language culture. So there was some pretty good theatre going on. There was some fantastic music happening. Gustav Mahler conducted in this building, who was also originally from Bohemia. And what's so fascinating is that after the First World War, when Czechoslovakia came into being, this continued as the German theatre, and it became, to no small extent, the theatre of Prague's German-speaking Jewish community. And many of the people who helped to keep the theatre going, because it was not getting the state subsidies that the Czech theatres were getting, were Jewish.
Okay.
And that's one of them built this building right opposite. His name was Julius Peček. He was a Jewish German-speaking banker, and he built this rather magnificent palace, and he put a great deal of money into the German theatre in Prague. It's a symbol of the tragedy of Czech history in the 20th century, that of course what happened after Hitler came to power in 1933 in Germany, in neighbouring Germany, a lot of German artists, theatre people, actors, writers, opera singers, conductors came to Prague. This actually brought a lot of energy into the national theatre, into the German theatre, but just a few years later, of course, the city was occupied. And the Peček family managed to escape just in time. But by a tragic irony, their palace, this building right in front of us, became the headquarters of the Gestapo. And to this day, there are some of the cells are still in place where people were tortured throughout the Second World War, throughout the occupation. Only about 10% of Prague's, or today's Czech Republic's Jewish population survived the war.
Yeah.
Then came the end of the war, and there was a huge backlash against the German language. Germans were expelled, and this building here, the German theatre, became what it is today, the State Opera.
Yeah.
And today, if you were to ask people in Prague, very few would have a kind of collective memory that this once was the German theatre of Prague. It is gradually changing. There is more and more interest in the history of the German theatre, and also the fact that a big part of its history is also part of the history of Jewish Prague, which people tend to forget.
Yes.
They tend to think of this as the Czech-German national conflict, whereas it's much more complicated.
Yeah, so we really have this kind of snapshot of Czech history over the 19th, 20th centuries, and including this kind of tragic history right here on this.
There's even a bit more history. The building in between the State Opera and the National Museum is the building of the former Czechoslovak Federal Assembly.
Okay.
Which no longer exists, of course, because Czechoslovakia no longer exists. So we've got another little piece in the mosaic.
Yeah.
So this country has, and this city has many layers.